Welcome back to Impactology Live. Our next guest is the wonderful Nataly Kogan, who's based in the US. Now, I had the great pleasure of seeing Nataly present live at a conference called Work Human, based in, it was Nashville, back in 2019, the days where we could travel. And so when we were putting together the list of impactologists that we would like to have on Impactology Live, absolutely Nataly came to mind. So a big welcome to you, Nataly.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really grateful to be able to cross the world, even though we don't get to hang out in person. I'm really grateful for technology that we get to, you guys are in the future, you're in Friday. So I'm glad that we get to connect through miles and time.
And it was so lovely. So Ash, who's event manager helping us out, I know that he shared some lotto numbers apparently into the future of Friday with you. So it's always nice to be into that future. He'll have to share them with us, given that he's got that insight and knowledge.
I love that. I wrote them down, don't worry.
Good, share them. Well, Nataly, obviously you have a huge presence, particularly in the US, also globally. For those, though, based here in Australia, perhaps that don't know you so well, I'm going to give you a little introduction and just share some of the amazing work that you've been doing. You are a leading global expert in optimizing emotional fitness and elevating leadership. You're the creator of the Happier Method and founder and CEO of Happier and Happier at Work. Nataly has just written a book, or quite recently, Happier Now, and also Gratitude Daily. You're a highly sought after international keynote speaker, which is where I had the pleasure of seeing you, and you've been featured in hundreds of media outlets, including the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Dr. Oz Show. By the age of 37, Nataly held top positions at McKinsey and Microsoft, and was the managing director at a venture capital fund, and was a member of the senior team there, and a senior team that started up actually 5 different startups and tech companies. You came to the US as a refugee with your family when you were 13, and one of the greatest accomplishments that Nataly has is learning how to speak English by watching Alyssa Milano on the fabulous 1980s sitcom, which I remember very dearly, Who's the Boss?
Love it.
So Alyssa Milano, have you met her?
Yeah, I think in that whole introduction, the most interesting part is Alyssa Milano and who's the boss. I mean, all the other stuff, yeah, whatever, yeah, whatever. But yes, we can start by talking. I'm so happy to hear you know the show. You know, I have to watch myself. Sometimes, you know, I'll be doing a talk and I'll mention it. And then one time last year, I was speaking to a group of millennials, younger folks, and I said, yeah, you know that show, Who's the Boss? And it was like, huh? And then like 2 seconds later, someone I guess looked on their phone. There was like, oh yeah, my mom loves that show. So yeah, that was a moment of truth for me. I was like, okay, thanks everyone. So I was very happy to hear. Yes, it was a fabulous show. And you know, TV is an amazing language teacher because we see the person and we hear it. And that's how our brain learns. And so, yeah, after we came to the US, I spoke almost no English. Whatever English I spoke, like came out with a horrible accent. And Who's the Boss was on twice a day. So I'd come home from school and that was my show. And I just idolized the character she played because she was a happy American teenager. No one made fun of her accent. And I was just like, okay, this is it. I just have to speak English like her. So I don't know, your viewers can judge. If you've heard Alyssa Milano speak, do I sound like Alyssa Milano? I don't know, but it's a pretty proud accomplishment.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I remember watching that show, and if my daughter, she's at school now, but if she was watching it equally, she would say, Mum, what are you talking about? Who's the boss? But my question for you, have you met Alyssa Milano? Have you been able to share with her that she inspired your love of the language, but also the accent?
Yeah, so I have not met her, but she does know the story. So I have become friendly with an actor here in the US, Matthew Del Negro. He's awesome. He's been in like West Wing and Sopranos. I was on his podcast. I interviewed him and he's friends with her. So when he heard the story, he was like texting her. He's like, oh my God, Alyssa, you got to know. And she was like, oh, that's so cool. So we have connected.
Excellent.
You know, we're not in person, but we have connected.
It's amazing, as you said earlier on, what we can do virtually these days. Nataly, tell us a bit about yourself. Obviously, you know, the introduction speaks to your career and your corporate career. How have you, I guess, during your career, made the move from so many different things, but really moved more into that executive presence and mentoring and coaching and facilitating and presenting? How did you make that move?
Yeah, so I think as with many, many people's careers, if I were to lie, I would tell you all that this is what I've always wanted to do. And I had this goal and I had this path planned out. And that would just be a bunch of BS because that is not at all, I think, what happens if we're really honest about it. You know, after we came to the US, you know, it was obviously really hard. We came as refugees. We had nothing. We lived in the projects on welfare. And the one thing I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I might have told people I wanted to be a lawyer, but that was just like to make my parents happy. Just like something sounds good, like I want to be a lawyer. I had no idea, but the one thing I knew how to do really well was to work very, very hard. There's this word grit right now that's become very popular. I didn't know the word, but like I've always had a lot of grit. And so for a long time, I would say my compass was what is the hardest thing I can do? Because that kind of gave me a sense of self. I didn't have the language. I didn't really have any background. And so I did some hard stuff. And I kind of was really motivated by that sense of achievement. I think many of us maybe fall into that trap of like, I'll be happy when. So I was like, I'll be happy when I have like important jobs and I'm able to support my family. And I'm not saying any of that wasn't meaningful. It really was. But I can't say any of it fulfilled me. And I can't say I ever paused to ask myself, well, what is like the contribution I want to make to the world, or what is it that I want to do? And so I did achieve a lot, but all of that was really kind of driven externally and also at a huge expense to my emotional fitness and health. I actually thought these words, emotional fitness, emotional health, like they were woo-woo, like they were for the weak, and I was strong. Like I did not need self-care. I did not need to acknowledge my emotions. And so what happened several years ago is I hit a wall. I completely burnt out. It was really, really scary. I mean, I write about this in my book. It was the darkest time in my life because I stopped being able to function. Like my grit could no longer carry me. And all of the emotions that I had stuffed down, all of the exhaustion, all of the self-harshness, it just came out. And so everything I do now came out of my own effort to try and find a different way to be, to try first to survive and then find a different way to be, to actually do work that was meaningful to me, but also do it in a way that, helps me thrive and not at the expense of everything in my life. And so the happier method that I now teach to companies and leaders and executives that I work with was really a method I created for myself. And I did a lot of research. I'm a total research junkie. Like I geek out on neuroscience. Like I read neuroscience research for fun. Well, my father is a scientist, so I have that in me. I did a lot of research. I dove into Eastern, disciplines, everything from yoga to Buddhism to Qigong. And I found a way. And for me, the biggest shift was, and this is what brought me to doing what I do, is that emotional fitness is a skill. It's not something we have or we don't, which is what I thought. I thought, okay, well, some people are just tougher and some people are not, but it's a skill. And like any skill, we can learn it by practicing. And so that's what, once I kind of emerged from that and used my own method, I said, oh my God, if it can help someone like me who is so rooted to suffering and struggle, like that's where I come from, it can help a lot of people. And so that is what I do now. So the happier method is based on research, but it's based on my own experiences, and everything I teach was initially what I used to help myself. So my career has taken this, I can't even call them concentric circles. It's just kind of been this like thing of many, many different turns, but I'm I'm turning 45 in a month or so. And it feels really amazing to be able to say that I feel as closely aligned to living and doing work that is fully like my bigger why, the biggest contribution I think I can give to the world. That feels pretty amazing to say.
Yeah. So you worked so hard to achieve, this corporate career, which a lot of us do. And what we spoke earlier today with one of our guests was that sometimes it feels like you climb to the top of the mountain that you think you're always meant to climb, and you get there and you think, gosh, the view from up here is just not what I thought it would be. What point did you realize, you talk about that low point, but what was it? What was the catalyst that actually made you realize I've got to do something different here?
Yeah, no, it's a great, question. And it's a great way to think about it. One thing I never really practiced was awareness, right? I kind of ran my life as a sprint. I was always just looking ahead. What is the next achievement? What is the next thing I can do? I never actually practiced awareness. And by that, I mean, well, how does this feel? Is this like fulfilling for me? Or how is the view from here? So I actually never even asked myself those questions until I completely burnt out and I wasn't at the top of anything. But for me, if I look back, there were many hints that I wasn't really pursuing something that was meaningful. I was just pursuing it because it just was the next difficult thing to do. And I think that, it's kind of a funny saying, but my teacher, who became my spiritual teacher when I was burnt out, which by the way, So this happened when I was 40. For the first 40 years of my life, I never uttered the word soul or spiritual again. That was woo-woo. That was for like the other people. I thought that was like a crutch for people who can't do life. So it's good to reflect and kindly make fun of myself. I mean, I do it with compassion. I just didn't realize. But my teacher, who's still my teacher, said to me, when I was really in the darkest place, she said, sometimes when you're not listening, the universe has to hit you over the head with a 2x4. And that really resonates. And I think it really resonates with a lot of leaders that I work with. Because if we are practice awareness of just like pausing and asking ourselves and reflecting on where we are, and is this meaningful? Is it fulfilling? There are hints as we climb the mountain, but most of the time we don't want to hear them. And so we don't practice awareness. We just climb. So I had many hints where, the work that I was doing was great and impressive. And I did my best, but it didn't fill me. I just never paid any attention. So I had to get hit on the head with a 2x4 to get to a really low point to say, wow, I need to figure out a different way to be.
And sometimes, that hitting on the head, it's metaphoric, but when you get to a certain point in your life, that can happen through lots of different ways. Obviously, health issues, sometimes they're family issues. There can be lots of catalysts. It's kind of a shame, but your story resonates around you do sometimes need that really strong message to say, hey, wake up, something needs to change here. You talked earlier.
I often say to people that part of my mission is to teach these skills and practices and share my story so that I can catch people and help them catch themselves before they get there. Because I do believe it's possible, but it's only possible to make that shift without some kind of crisis if we get really honest with ourselves. And that's a skill, right? That's a skill of awareness, but it's a hard one. And our brain doesn't often want to do it.
No, because it takes courage too, and it takes bravery, and it's about increasing your self-awareness. And what you say there about, that's the woo-woo stuff for other people, that absolutely makes sense. If you've been brought up particularly, I think, with fairly strong work ethic and a mentality of keep going, which are the words that I know have been drummed into me, and I'm thankful for them. However, sometimes when you are used to, kind of keep on going, it's not always the right thing to do, and sometimes we need to take that pause.
Totally. And you touched on so many great things. I'm working on my next book right now. And it's about using these emotional fitness skills to help you struggle less through challenges and actually thrive through challenges. And I write a lot about courage, and I have a whole chapter about courage. And courage, I think when we think of courage, we often think of it externally, doing something that's scary or doing something new. But I talk about courage, and I think it's important to practice courage in looking within. There's a lot of courage that it takes to become self-aware. It takes a lot of courage to become aware of the thoughts we have, of the default patterns that maybe we're following that maybe are not true to us. That is scary. The human brain loves the easiest path, right? Our brain looks for the path of least resistance. We look for patterns, right? And it's not because the brain is lazy, by the way. It's because the brain can only process so much information, cannot take in, like right now, everyone is looking at me. You have way more information than you can take in. So the brain is doing a pattern. Like if you've been looking at a screen for a while, your brain is kind of zooming out. It's like, oh, I see the yellow outline. That's the speaker. So our brain is trying to preserve its energy. So what happens is, unless we have the courage to pause and reflect and actually ask ourselves some hard questions, the brain is going to be on autopilot. And so when we talk about courage, I think it's really important to apply it within ourselves, to recognize what are the default patterns that we've fallen into, or is this path meaningful to us? It also, I think, is really important to use courage to become aware of, well, how am I treating myself? I think that's a really huge part. You talk about like, go, go, go. I am no less ambitious than I was, probably more. I mean, what I'm trying to do now, right? I'm trying to get every single awesome human in the world to practice their emotional fitness as a skill so they can thrive. That is a pretty crazy ambition, okay? So I am no less ambitious, but I am doing my work in a way that doesn't involve constant sacrifice of my well-being, and that takes a lot of courage because it means I have to practice a lot of awareness. I have to take breaks. I have to say no to things, right? That takes a lot of courage. And so I think it's really important. And the other, I do a lot of work with leaders. I run several leadership groups, virtual groups every year for leaders. And we talk about emotional responsibility. And I think it's really important to talk about it in the context of like the go, go, go. Part of emotional responsibility is our emotional awareness, and part of it is our openness. And so I love that you touched on those, because it's not that I'm advising people to not be ambitious and to not go, go, go. Do it. I mean, the human life is about progress and change and creation, but we have to practice courage and emotional fitness skills and awareness so that we can do that sustainably and meaningfully. And so we don't need a 2x4 as I did.
Yeah. And also so we can maintain that love and the passion for what we're doing, and the happiness. So just on, you mentioned before, obviously with Happier Now, you had to devise your own method. Can you give us a little bit of insight into that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things part of the method is kind of these 3 core mindset shifts. And then there's these 5 skills. And the mindset shifts, I think, are really important to start with. The first is that happiness and emotional health and fitness is not an extra. It is not a prize you get at the end, which is I'll be happy when, right? I'll be happy when I build my company or I get that new promotion or whatever. We all get that in the mindset. Well, it turns out to be the opposite. When you cultivate your well-being first, research shows you perform at the highest level of your potential. You're more productive, more creative. You help others more frequently. You're better able to achieve all the things you care about. So that's the first thing, is to stop treating your happiness as a carrot that you get once you do enough, and to recognize it's an input into a great life, not an output. The second mindset shift of the method is to recognize that emotional health has nothing to do with being positive all the time. I think it's one of the biggest traps that we fall into, like thinking that it's about like, find the silver lining or be positive. We're human beings. We are not meant to feel good all the time. We are meant to experience a wide variety of emotions. And so I really encourage, as part of the method, is to embrace different emotions that you feel and learn how to do that. And the third mindset shift is the one I've already talked about, is that emotional health and happiness, they're skills. They're not given or not given. They're skills that you practice. And that's where the 5 skills come in. And so just as a quick overview, the 5 skills are, the first is acceptance, which, whenever I say that word, I used to think it too. It's like, oh, whatever happens, happens, I was allergic to that. And that's the opposite of acceptance. Acceptance is not about rolling over and letting life kind of go. It's actually about boldly embracing reality. Acceptance is about saying, looking at things with clarity, this is how it is, versus judgment. Oh, it shouldn't be like this, it should be different. And then using that as your starting point to say, given how this is, what is the next best thing I can do? The second skill is gratitude, which is all about zooming in on what's good in your life, even when things are challenging, and then sharing your gratitude with others. The third is intentional kindness and compassion, which is all about doing something to elevate or support another person and not expect anything in return, which is the challenging part for most of us. The fourth skill is about connecting to your bigger why, but not in the abstract, like once a year I think about my sense of meaning. But it's about how do daily things that I do, how do they connect to my sense of purpose? How do they contribute to someone other than me? And the fifth skill is skill of self-care, which is a skill of optimizing your emotional, mental, and physical energy. And so those are the 5 skills, the 3 mindset shifts and the 5 skills. And then the way I teach the skills, I often say to people, please don't ever call me a motivational speaker, because I do not want to motivate or inspire anyone. I want to activate people to do the practices, to practice the skills. So I obsess about practicing and offer. I think my book has something like 37 different 1-minute practices, because that to me is the biggest, that's my mission, is I want everyone to see their emotional fitness as a skill and practice. Just like we go for a run or go to the gym, if we want to improve our physical fitness, we have to practice our emotional fitness skills.
Yeah, that's great. And Nataly, we'll put a link up on our website of your book, because I think it's worth everyone having a look at it. It's got such extraordinary richness in there around building this emotional fitness, which often we don't pay too much attention to. Mm-hmm. Now, on something a little different, you are very generous on Insta. I have seen you bust a few TikTok moves with your daughter. Now, I have attempted to do this with my daughter, and she runs a mile. She won't have a bar of it. What is the latest TikTok move you are working on?
All right. So first of all, how old is your daughter?
She's almost 13.
Okay, you're in that age. So mine is 16. Mia, who's over there listening to all my talks very patiently, because our walls are not that thick. So I think when they're a little bit older, there's more patience. with you, it actually becomes kind of like fun. I'll tell you the move that I have not been able to figure out, but there is this thing that they do, which is about like going like this, but I'm not doing it right. And it's like you tilt your head. See, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show her later. I'm not doing it right, but there's like this tilt head that they do. I can't figure it out, but at 16, that's fun.
Right.
So at 16, it's really fun to do a TikTok with your mom who can't quite do it right. At 13, yeah, mom is.
Yeah. Mum's like, no, stay away from the platform. Mum is what she says to me. It says to me,
Yeah.
stay away from the platform. That thing, it just
hope,
reminded me of the
what
dab.
I'm telling you. You have hope. Oh yeah, forget that. Mm-hmm.
I think the dab is 2017. I don't know. Now I'm really showing my age. Not a good thing for me to do. Now, you've got some beautiful paintings in the background. You are an extraordinary artist, and that's another thing that you share with your viewers, if you like, on Instagram and other platforms. Can you talk to us about how you feel when you paint?
Yeah, so I'm so glad. So the art everyone is looking at behind me is my art. Here, I'll tilt my screen a little bit so you can see the top. So my art is something that I do for joy. I've never had a lesson. I'm completely self-taught, and I do it for joy. And I have wanted to paint my whole life, and I never let myself, because what does painting have to do with my career? What does it have to do with achievements? What does it have to do with taking care of my family? Nothing. Therefore, I didn't let myself do it because it felt like this indulgence, this like a treat that I wouldn't let myself have. And when I was going through the burnout, I started to allow myself to do things that brought me joy. And I know I'm not alone. I work with so many people from every kind of background. So many of us have trouble doing things just because they feel good, because it's like joy is frivolous. I cannot tell you how powerful creating art has been for me to heal myself, my family. I share it with hundreds of thousands of people. I now do, we've even started doing like science of creativity workshops with companies. I just did a series with Google where I talk about creativity as a form of self-care, and then we'll paint together. But more than anything, the reason I share it is I want to encourage everyone to recognize that your joy is your fuel. Doing something joyful fuels your emotional and mental energy, and your energy is literally fuel. Like a car cannot run without gas. You cannot run. You cannot do the things that are meaningful to you at work and outside of work if you don't have fuel. So joy is human fuel. So to feel guilty to do something for joy, it's like saying, I feel guilty about being alive. And I really mean it, because to be alive, to be a human being, is to have fuel and have joy. And so to me, whenever I share my art, it's more than just sharing my art, because it's something I do for joy, and it brings joy to others. And it's always an opportunity. I always get to give this pep talk to people that to feel a moment of joy, or more than a moment, is to fuel yourself. And when you are fueled, you're able to persevere and be at your best in whatever it is you're doing, in your work or your life.
You mentioned your pep talks, and your pep talks is something else. You actually take your viewers on a journey through your neighbourhood as you go on these pep talks. And, I think you still do them weekly. I remember certainly tuning in. Now, you always have a message that comes with that pep talk, and you will often say, this is a message I need to give to myself. Can you talk to us a little bit more about, how do the ideas form around what message you're going to give on the pep talks?
Oh yeah, no. So I still do them. It's so cold here now. So I'm in Boston. It gets cold. I always say, please come to Boston. It's a beautiful place to live. Just not like end of November through March. You are not welcome, because there's nothing good. It's too cold. But so we're getting into cold periods. So I'm starting to do them inside, because I just like, it's too cold for me. But I do them on my daily walk. And what I do, so I usually do them on a Monday or Tuesday. And what I really do is, like, as I leave the house, I ask myself, what is something that I need to hear this week? And that's what I share. And I actually want to say something about that, because I think that many of us underestimate the power of our self-talk. But the thing is, the way that you talk to yourself has the same impact as when someone else talks to you. So if you are supportive to yourself, if you encourage yourself, it has the same positive impact as if a friend is doing it, or a colleague. If you are beating yourself up, if you're sabotaging yourself, if you're constantly telling yourself, you're not doing this right, I'm not doing this right, it has the same impact. And so my pep talks are really my self-talk that I share with others.
And Nataly, what recommendation do you have for individuals that catch themselves with negative self-talk but find themselves going back there more often than not?
Yeah, I love the question. I love any questions that let me give a practice because, like I said, I'm an activational speaker. So I'm going to give you my favorite 3-step practice to learn how to talk to yourself as a friend, because that is the practice. We have to learn to create a friendship with ourselves. In fact, before I give you the practice, I want everyone listening to just answer this question. What kind of relationship do you have with yourself? I don't think for most of my life I asked myself this question. In fact, if someone did, I think it's ridiculous. What do you mean? What kind of relationship I have with myself? But you have a relationship with yourself. Mine for most of my life was like either like a military sergeant, like go, 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 or like a harsh critic. It's like I always looked out for like, oh, yeah, look, you did that badly, let me tell you. So thinking about the relationship you have with yourself and cultivating a friendship is really one of the core skills of thriving. And so here is your practice, 3 steps to learn to talk to yourself as a friend. So when, as you said, when you notice that you're being harsh towards yourself or beating yourself up or criticizing yourself, I want you to pause and I want you to imagine that you're talking to a dear friend. I literally want you to imagine that person. So I often use my daughter, Mia, or my best friend, Sharon, for this. So envision you are talking to them and do these 3 steps. The first is acknowledge. So if it's a mistake you made, just like if it's a mistake your friend made, acknowledge what happened. You know, like, oh, that email, I could have worded it better. Or, yep, I didn't quite do well on the part. But acknowledge does not mean judge. Notice I didn't say, you are so dumb and stupid to have not written that email well. That's judgment. Acknowledgement is just about the facts, like you would do it to a friend, like, oh, bummer, you really didn't do as great as you wanted to, right? Step 2, support. Say something supportive to yourself as if you would to this friend. So think of like when a friend comes to you and they're like, oh, I really screwed that up. Once you acknowledge it, you don't say like, wow, you are pathetic, you are awful. But we say that to ourselves. So say something supportive, like, you know what, you're a human being. Like you can't expect yourself to be perfect all the time. And step 3, move forward. Identify one thing that you could do to move forward. Maybe you learned something, maybe you want to do something better, but that move forward really helps your brain to shift out of I suck, I'm horrible, and into, okay, here's one thing I could do. So acknowledge, support, move forward, but imagine that you are talking to that friend. And I cannot tell you how powerful this practice is because it teaches us to talk to ourselves the way that we would talk to a friend. So this is everyone's homework, 3 steps to talk to yourself as you would to a friend.
Now, have you used that advice when it comes to not being able to do the TikTok moves?
I am actually pretty good. So here's the thing. What I didn't say as part of the practice is that you always do it perfectly, right? Yeah. So yeah, the instinct. I mean, listen, I spent 40 years of my life being amazing at beating myself up in my head. So it's not like it goes away overnight. But what changes now is when I go, oh my God, that was pathetic. I go, okay, brain, thank you very much. Not very helpful. Let's talk to ourselves as we're talking to a friend. Okay, not the best TikTok move, but okay, you are 44, not 12, so it happens. And if you want to get better, just practice, right? Boom, boom, boom. So it doesn't mean that you never are harsh towards yourself. It just means that you aware and then you talk back to your brain. That's like one of my, the core skills that I can like share with everyone is, or the core insights is recognizing that you do not have to go along with every thought your brain has. Yeah. You have a choice. Your brain thinks thoughts. You have a choice. You can go along with it. You can shift it. You can let it go. Or my favorite, you can talk back to your brain because you got to have a little sass with it, you know?
Well, Nataly, I've got to share something with you. Before the self-talk happens with me around TikTok moves, my 17-year-old daughter, Mia, tells me, stop right there. It's not your place. So
I love knowing that your daughter's name is Mia too. And, you know, she's being a nice friend. She's saving you some internal pain and harshness.
Yeah, truth bombs is what she calls them. Nataly, the color yellow, what's the inspiration behind that? What's the story behind the color yellow?
Okay, very simple. I'm going to show you. Okay. When you have a book out, you should match the cover. This is my advice, okay? So when we were working on my book cover, and this is the soft copy, but the hardcover is the same color. When we were working on my book cover with the publisher, they said, well, you love color. And I said, yes, it brings me joy. Like my art has a lot of color. I love. So they were like, what's a great bold color? And I was like, yellow. Yellow, it's actually a color that makes you happy. It makes your brain more positive. I love the boldness of it. And then I decided, you know what? Writing a book is like one of the hardest things I've ever done. And my whole like heart and soul and mind are in that book. I was like, okay, so I always wear yellow when I speak. So just this year, since the pandemic broke out, I've done 136 talks. Wow. So I have worn yellow 136 times, but I'm always like, if you go to happier.com, you'll see every picture of me on stage, I'm in yellow, and it's like become a thing. It brings me joy. That's it. But I cannot tell you how many people, it's so fun. Like now, like people will put on something yellow and they'll put on Instagram and they'll tag me and they're like, busting my yellow, like Nataly, brings me joy. Like I'm going with it. So, if I can spread a little joy this way, I'm all in.
Nataly, we love the brand alignment because Impactology, our brand is all about yellow. So we knew that we were a perfect fit in terms of a brand alignment.
That's right. That's right. No, yellow is, every color has evokes certain emotions, whether we're cognizant of them or not. And yellow evokes positive kind of, it's a joyful, thoughtful color actually. So it matches.
Nataly, you did mention that you've done so many talks this year and we have been restricted with travel. Where in the world would you like to be now that makes you the most happiness?
Oh my goodness, you're really going to ask me that question. So I'm going to be thinking about this. There's a couple of places. So I think I mentioned last year, actually in the fall, I got to go to Sydney. I'd never been to Australia. That was awesome. It was a little bit far away, you guys. If you could just move Australia just a tiny bit closer, like by hour 14 of the flight, I was like, okay, can we get there? A couple of places. I was supposed to go to Dubai. I was supposed to speak in Dubai this year. It was one of the things that got canceled. I've never been. I'd love to visit. I have a lot of family in Israel, and I've been to Israel many, many, many times. I absolutely love going there. So if I could snap my fingers, I'd go there. And third would be Peru. My family and I actually were supposed to be in Peru this summer. It's a trip we didn't get to take. We hope to take it. It's a place I have always wanted to go, and it draws me. So a little bit of my soul is there. So once we're done with this Corona thing, I'm going.
Sounds good.
Now we're looking forward to that time as well. Nataly, we're coming up to, I guess in the US, there's Thanksgiving Day, which is not far away. And then we're going to head towards the end of the year and the festive season, and people are thinking about 2021. And I'm certainly, my head sort of moving into that space as well. What is some of the advice when people start slowing down after a really tough year? What advice do you provide, can you provide individuals to make the most of that time and make sure that they can reignite 2021 with a bit of gusto?
It's a great question. I'm looking forward to some of that slowdown. It's been a whirlwind, as it's been for everyone. And I'm looking forward to some of that. A couple of things I guess I would say. The first is to be kind to yourself. We have all been through a lot. We've been through something really, and we're still in it, something really traumatic. Our brain has a really hard time with change and uncertainty and danger, and we're living in change and uncertainty and danger in all kind of different ways. And so my first advice is to honor yourself and be kind to yourself, and actually take some time to feel what you feel, to just be, to not immediately run. I think practicing self-compassion and self-kindness, I would love for that to be on everyone's resolutions list for 2021. It is a way that we fuel ourselves, right? It's a way that we can give ourselves the resilience, the energy to keep going. The other thing I would love for folks to think about is what is, one of my heroes is Viktor Frankl, who is a very famous Austrian psychotherapist who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which is an incredible book. If you haven't read it, I cannot recommend it enough. And many of you probably know his story. He was in the concentration camp and survived it. And he's really the founder of psychotherapy that's based on searching, connecting to your sense of purpose. And he has this concept of tragic optimism, which I really love. And tragic optimism is finding hope amidst and despite life's pain and suffering and challenges. And that's the other thing I encourage everyone to do is within the challenges we've all been facing, there's also an opportunity to think about and search for your sense of purpose. How can you grow during this challenging time? How could you contribute someone other than you? How could you maybe do something that helps you reach a goal that you have? Those are just some ways to connect to our sense of meaning. But I find that just a really hopeful lens to just consider that we have an opportunity not just to get through this time, but to actually grow through this time. And it doesn't come from being tough to ourselves. It doesn't come from like, come on, go, go, go. It comes from treating ourselves with compassion and then searching for positive meaning amidst these challenges. So those would be the two things I'd say.
That's wonderful, Nataly. And I love the work of Viktor Frankl as well. And the theme from his work is around stimulus and response and being able to get a gap between those two. It's because it's there we make our choices and it's where we get to ultimately form our destiny. So really pleased to have heard that in terms of that advice as well. Nataly, we're coming up to a point in our conversation. We've got a couple questions that we ask all our guests. And are you ready for them, first of all?
I'm in. Shoot,
Great.
I'm ready.
Excellent. You are on a video call with your 18-year-old self. What life advice would you provide young Nataly?
Please cut the bangs. Just leave that there. No bangs. Okay, and that would be the most important one. And I do mean that. I think there's a couple of things I would say. Someone actually asked me this recently. Life is not a series of to-dos. Life is a treasured experience to cherish. And to put another way, you are a being, not a doing. I think it's probably the thing I've said to my daughter the most. You are a being, not a doing. And it's not just about ticking things off. I would definitely tell my 18-year-old self to be kinder to herself and to practice compassion and to recognize that's not going to prevent her from growing and improving, but actually help her. And the other thing I would say to my 18-year-old self would be to look for meaning. It's not that I didn't, but it wasn't intentional. And so I would ask her to look for her bigger why as a guide for what to do versus the mountaintop. But I definitely start with the bangs.
That's lovely advice. And I guess it's the kind of advice that you'll be able to provide your Mia in the next 12 months as well. And hopefully she will heed some of that advice too. And the final question, it's actually a game of word association.
Okay.
So say word, the first thing that comes into your mind. Watercolors.
Yellow.
Family.
Mia and Avi.
Holiday.
New Year's. We Russians, just to say, so in Russia we celebrate New Year's like that's the family holiday. So even though I'm Jewish, we have a New Year's tree that looks like a Christmas tree and it has stuff on it and we give gifts to each other on New Year's. It is my absolute favorite holiday of the year is New Year's.
Happier.
My vision.
Impact.
What's meaningful?
Inspiration.
Art.
2020.
A year of challenge and hope.
The future.
Tragically optimistic.
Love it. Thank you
Let's
so
end
much,
with
Nataly.
that.
Thank you so much for making the time. I've just got so many notes here that I've taken from this 45-minute conversation. So I thank you, and thank you on behalf of everyone that's joining us as well. We appreciate it. And we'll be putting details of Nataly's books on our website. We look forward to seeing you soon. Do take care.
No, thank you both so much. Thank you for your creative and thoughtful questions. It's such joy for me that you put so much thought into it. I'm really grateful. Thank you everyone who is tuning in, will be tuning in. I love technology for these moments. So thank you both so much, and everyone behind the scenes. I'm really grateful to have been able to do this. I learned something in this conversation, so I'm really grateful for that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see you in Melbourne sometime soon.
Thank you, Nataly.
I have the art museums on my wish list. So absolutely. There's some art there that I must see. So I can't wait. Thank you both so much. Have a good rest of your Friday.
You too. Thank you. See you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And that was Nataly Kogan, and we have got 15 minutes to go for our next presentation. And Rita, our next presentation, refresh my memory.
Our next presentation is actually a pre-recorded interview. We screened it last night at 7 p.m. here in Melbourne. For those of you joining us from all over the globe, you may have been asleep at the time that we screened it, and that's why we're screening it again today. It is the story of both Bassam Aramin and Rami El Hanan, and their story, which is actually one of sadness, trauma, loss, but also hope and love, is featured in the book A Paragon by Colin McCann. You will absolutely enjoy this conversation without a doubt. If you haven't read the book, go out and get yourself a copy. Not now, post the screening of this in an hour or so, but we will see you back in 15 minutes.